let's talk about all the things I read in July. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy. I hope you're doing really well wherever or whenever in the world that you are. I hope that you're enjoying the Olympics as much as I am. Literally every single day, I'm watching highlights on Instagram, on the TV when I can, and I'm just crying. I don't know how anyone expects us to do any work when people are living their dreams. It's too much for me some days. Okay, sorry if the angle changed. I can't tell if I'm crooked or not. Is this straight? Is this thing on? Okay, hopefully that's even and straight. And if not, oh well. Before we get into what I read in July, I want to know two things. One, I would love to hear what your favorite book was from July. I am feeling really slumpy still. I was slumpy in July, and that is just moving right into August, so I could use some inspiration. And then two, I would love to know what Olympic event you wish you could do. Like if you could wake up tomorrow and be an Olympian, which summer Olympic event would you want to do? My family had a not intense debate, but a lively discussion about this yesterday. And low-key, I feel like I'd either want to be on the like beach volleyball team or maybe one of the like cool kayaking races. I don't know, let me know your thoughts. Also, I'd love to hear just what about the Olympics has brought you joy, because the Olympics is really like just filling my whole heart right now. Anyways, I'm so sorry if the lighting and the angle has changed. I pulled a rookie camera user mistake and my battery died, and I don't have a spare battery, so we had to step away for a little bit so that the battery could charge, but we're back. All right, so let's talk about the 9 books that I read in January. That's not the best reading month that I've ever had, both in book rating average and number. I think it's a real reflection of the slumpiness that I've been experiencing, but it was still a month of which I read. So that's a win, I guess, overall. I started the month off pretty strong. I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and I picked this up because it was on my Audible TBR, and wow, I don't know why or how it took me so long to read it, but I'm so thankful that I did. I'm kind of obsessed. I really liked this. If you're not familiar, A Dowry of Blood is a Dracula retelling where his first wife, Constantana? I kind of forget her name, but she's writing a letter to him, to Dracula, recounting their life together. It is fascinating. I think if you're going into this book expecting it to just be like vampire spiciness, like that's not the right expectation. This is a deeply emotional story. And, you know, as you're with her, with Constantana, shoot, I can't remember her name. But at the beginning, you know, you're with her as she's falling in love with Dracula, and you get a real sense of her passion, her obsession with Dracula, and you get to experience as that starts to change throughout their relationship. You get to meet the other consorts and how her relationship with them kind of changes over time. And it is just hauntingly beautiful. I think the actual writing itself, the prose is stunning. I felt really emotionally connected to Constantana and her experience like of Dracula and the other central characters in the story. I think my only complaint is that because I was so obsessed with this, I really wish it was a little longer. Like I wanted more time with each of these characters, and I would love to be able to jump forward like in an epilogue status and catch up with these characters to see like where their lives go. Oh my God, what I wouldn't do for an epilogue. It was just really good. I definitely felt very emotional at parts. I think it's such a like honest portrayal of what a very toxic relationship can look like and feel like from start to end. And I don't know, getting to be part of her journey, especially as she's finding freedom and liberation out of that relationship. I just thought it was so good. I'm so glad that I picked it up. I highly recommend it. The audio was great. It's absolutely worth the hype. I'm so glad I picked it up again. I feel like I broke a record. I'm like, I'm obsessed. It was so good. You should pick it up. I gave it 4.5 stars immediately after reading, but it's really stuck with me throughout July. So like I might bump that up to a 5 star. I don't know. we'll see. Then I picked up The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. This was our Broads Who book pick for the month of July. My aunt got to pick. She's not in our book club, but we were traveling at the time that we were hosting the book club, and so she was like our honorary guest member, and so she got to pick. Thanks, Aunt Kathy. It was very fun. This is a historical fiction story that has some elements of magical realism, and you're following these three main characters. Two of them are in the present timeline. One of them exists in the past, and as the story progresses, you're kind of discovering the mystery of this lost bookshop, and also you're understanding the parallels between these groups of characters across time and across settings. And you know what? I really enjoyed myself. I thought it was charming, very enchanting. It's got a little bit of romance, a little bit of history, a little bit of mystery and intrigue. And for me, that created a really lovely reading experience. Now, I don't think everyone in our book club felt that way. I think there was pretty mixed reviews. Some people struggled a bit with the pacing and or the relationship / character development, especially with the romance. I think for some people it didn't feel like there was enough shown about like the romance at the core of this book, like why they were into each other. The pacing of that felt a little bit off. And I think the thing that didn't land for everybody was the magical realism itself, which totally fair if that's not your jam. Like it makes sense that it wouldn't resonate for you in a story like this, but like I found it perfectly enjoyable. I think, you know, if you're going into this story just like with an open mind and like wanting something kind of engaging and whimsical, although a little bit dark at times, like I think it could be a good one to pick up. I don't know, I really liked it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a good time. And it's definitely something that I don't know that I would have necessarily picked up for myself. So it's always fun to kind of step outside your comfort zone a little bit and find something that's a delight to read. Next, I read The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. This was for my Reading Roulette selection of poetry that had to do with animals in some way, shape, or form. And I ended up picking this up, the audio version on Hoopla, and thank goodness I did, because if I had been reading it physically, I can't even imagine how lost in the sauce I would have been. Like, the audio helped me at least pick up on like the atmosphere and the tone of the poem. Without that, I would have been so clueless. I don't know what this poem was about at all. I am not a English major, nor am I in the practice of like analyzing text using literary devices. And so whatever this poem is about, I truly have no idea. I liked my experience listening to it. Is very spooky and engaging. And there were a few things that I was like, oh, I had no idea that this was from this poem. For example, Once Upon a Midnight Dreary, had no idea that that was from this poem, even though I feel like it's a very familiar line. There's also another one that said, another line that said, prophet said I, a thing of evil. And wow, that's the only takeaway that I have. And I agree that capitalism, yes, is the root of all evil. He was onto something, that Edgar Allan Poe. Overall, like, this was fine. I gave it 3 stars. This is not the style of poetry that I like this very metaphorical, I don't even know what you'd call it. I really prefer more memoir style poetry. So yeah, this was like, I felt completely out of my league reading this. I'm glad that I picked it up, but like, I never need to come back to it again. Next, I did a little bit of a reread of the Bridge Kingdom series by Danielle L. Jensen. I read The Bridge Kingdom and then Traitor Queen. This was just kind of like my comfortable bedtime listen. If you're not familiar, this is an enemies to lovers romance, and it's like one of my favorites. It's such an OG classic. Like, yes, there's some pacing issues. Yes, there's some plot holes, and like, yes, there's some paragraphs of info dumping, and yet it's like one of my favorites. I love especially Laura, the FMC. Her character development through these 2 books I think is so strong. I really like their romance, and I find the world building to be very interesting. So it's one of my faves. I reread it. It was great. I don't know if I can really give it 5 stars because like I've read it a gazillion times, but a comfortable 5 stars. Not like a, this is the best literary thing I've ever picked up. It's just like, I really enjoy it. Next, I have a soft DNF to announce, The Great Divide by Cristina Enriquez. This is a historical fiction surrounding the construction of the Panama Canal. I get the sense that we're following multi-POVs, like multiple characters within this setting and context. I read 3 or 4 chapters and I just have not felt drawn or compelled to come back to the story and pick it back up. I started it back in May. It is now August. I just don't think I'm in the headspace to read this. And so I don't know. I'm going to put it down for now, not for forever, just for now, because I do find that the historical setting is interesting to me. I don't know much about it, so I'm certainly curious about that. And the writing is interesting as you're getting to know these characters in the opening chapters. Like each character feels pretty distinct and it's very descriptive. So I really think it sets a good like setting for where we are, but it's just not what I want to, it's just not what I want to read right now. So soft DNF. Next, I picked up the audio for Funny in Farsi, a memoir of growing up Iranian in America by Firuza Duma. And again, this was like a download that I had on my Audible. I originally picked this up for maybe back in February, where I had to read a nonfiction with a feeling word in the title. And so I picked that up. Sorry about that. Got an alert for a vet appointment. Anyways, so in this memoir, she's really just sharing stories about her life. She moved from Iran to the United States when she was like 7 or 8, and is just kind of sharing stories about what that experience was like when she first moved to the US and kind of as she grew up. And although so many stories are kind of centering culture shock and racism and prejudice, she balances a lot of those hard themes with joy, resilience, with familial connection, and of course humor, and it made for a really meaningful reading experience. So I really enjoyed myself. She does narrate the audiobook, so whether or not you pick up the audio version or the physical book, I think it's a really good memoir. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Oh no, my battery's gonna die again. Oh my goodness, you guys, this camera battery situation is giving me the blues. This is my 3rd go at just trying to complete this video because of my battery. Okay, I think we've got enough. We're juiced up enough to finish. Getting back on track. The next book that I read was The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor Lavelle. And this was another Reading Roulette selection. I had to read a horror book with a color word in the title. And this was a pretty interesting horror novella with some urban fantasy elements. I'm not gonna lie, I have complicated feelings about this novella. On one hand, I was pretty gripped from page 1. I found the world and the writing fascinating, and the character Tom was super compelling, and it's got this very spooky atmosphere. However, I don't know if I actually enjoyed it. I think, you know what? After I finished it and I just had this like lingering sense of confusion, it was really sticking with me. I decided to look through some reviews, and I had no idea that this was a retelling or a reimagining of a different story. I obviously have no knowledge of the source material, and so I'm sure that that contributed to my lack of understanding about like what this story was trying to do or like what this was really about. Especially towards the end, like really confused about how part 1 and part 2 related. Like, yes, I could tell that the characters were the same, but they felt like 2 completely different stories. And I feel like I needed more information about the world to really understand like what was going on. And towards the end, there's kind of this aha moment or like this reveal that just completely went over my head. It just didn't pack the punch that I think it was like intending to, because I genuinely had no idea what was going on. So I think like that's my bad. I was definitely a little disappointed that I didn't like this more, but you know, it is what it is. I'm glad that I picked it up. I certainly want to pick up more from this author. I just think this was a bit of a miss for me. I'm so curious. If you've read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, so that was The Ballad of Black Tom. I thought it was just okay. I think I landed on 3 stars. The last book that I picked up in July was The Ever King by L.J. Andrews. And I'm not gonna lie, this was a big miss for me. I had really high expectations going into it. There's a lot of things in the synopsis that I typically really enjoy. It's a captive-captor romance, enemies to lovers. There's like some piratey stuff going on, and there's some Viking inspiration drawn into the world building. Like, I love all of those things. And yet, I did not like this book at all. I gave it a 2 stars, And that feels like a stretch for me. Being totally honest, I think what really didn't work for me was the audio narration. I picked this up because it was on my Audible TBR, and I was feeling slumpy, so I was like, oh great, a fantasy romance will help kick me out of that slump. No, this book, and one other that I'll mention in a little bit, had the complete opposite effect. For this, there's, you know, you have your two main characters. You've got chapters from the FMC point of view, and then you have chapters from the MMC's point of view. And the narrators, their performance just didn't resonate with me. Their voices did not match how I imagine these characters to look, sound, and feel. Kind of right away, I was not feeling it. So in hindsight, I should have switched to like Kindle or whatever, but I didn't because, I don't know, I didn't feel that invested, so I didn't bother to make the switch. But yeah, I really struggled with the audio. I would highly recommend you physically read this if you're able to. Audio performances are so subjective, right? Like audiobook narrators that I love, maybe they're not your cup of tea and vice versa. So, you know, maybe listen to a sample, and if it feels like those actors, those voice actors are like just right for you, amazing. You might love this story and love their performances. It just like didn't work for me for whatever reason. Aside from the audiobook narration, I just like didn't like either character as individuals or their relationship. For me, the guy, what was his name? Eric, he just felt kind of like fake bad guy, like fake mean. And also I'm learning as I get older, the super alpha male like character type does not work for me. But if you like that toucher and you die trope, like this might be perfect for you. It just doesn't really work for me these days. I don't find it appealing. I don't find it very sexy. It just kind of gives me the ick. So I also think right away I knew that like Eric was not the love interest for me. So, you know, another red flag that I probably should have just DNF'd this after 10 minutes of listening to it. The girl, whatever her name was, in the book, like all of her chapters are titled Songbird. Oh, I really didn't like their nicknames for each other. He calls her Songbird and she calls him Serpent, and it was a miss for me. I hated it. He also calls her Love all the time, like consistently. Even in the part of the story where they're supposed to be enemies, he's like addressing her with a pet name. It just, whatever. And for her, she was just kind of frustrating to me. She was a little bit like damsel-y, like damsel in distress, which I didn't really appreciate. I felt like a lot of their time spent together is basically her starting arguments to prove to herself and to him that she's totally not in love with him, when it's like so obvious that she's been in love with him since she put her eyes on him. Like, I just didn't think their dynamic was well done. I didn't buy it. I didn't care about it. And you know what? Towards the end, when they finally like get together, I was so uninterested in their relationship. Not only did I not care about the steamy scenes, I fast forwarded. I skipped through the steamy scenes because I didn't even want to hear it. I was like just so icked by their relationship, and I didn't buy into it at all. I didn't care about it at all. I didn't like it at all. Anyways, I just think by the end of this book, I was just kind of in autopilot, just like listening to listen. I legit did not care at all about the ending. There was like a little plot twist that did not affect me at all because I absolutely will not continue on in the series. This just like really didn't work for me, and I'm both surprised and not surprised by that. You know, I've mentioned once or twice in this video that I was feeling pretty slumpy in July, and honestly still am. And I think this book, The Ever King, like really did that to me. I also, the entire month of July on my Kindle, have been reading The Throne of Honor and Blood, which is the second book in the Mortal Fates series by Jay Bree. I am so disappointed with how that book is going. I technically haven't finished. I have about 150 pages left of The Throne of Honor and Blood, and I like couldn't care less. All of the angst and tension and animosity and like heat that you get from the first book just kind of disintegrates into the second book, and like all of a sudden Soren is just completely obsessed with Rook, which like I understand but then you lose an element of intrigue. This second book is like really missing something. And also the Rook in the second book doesn't remind me very much of the Rook we get in the first book. I don't know. I mean, obviously I'm not done and it's already August, so I'll talk more about my thoughts maybe in my August review if I even finish it. I genuinely don't know, but like the combination of the Ever King and the Honor of Throne and the Throne of Honor and Blood has like really ruined my reading mood. Has that ever happened to you where a book or a combination of books just like poo-poo on your parade? That's how it's feeling right now for me, but it's fine. This feeling will pass. All will be well. I know that inevitably I will read something that inspires me, that brings me joy, and like puts me right back into my reading rhythm. I'm like desperate for that to happen already. So anyways, those are all the books that I read in July. There weren't that many. My favorite book for sure was A Dowry of Blood. It was excellent. I would recommend that to anyone. It's so well written. It's so interesting. I'm obsessed. And then my next, like my part 2 recommendation, I mean, I guess would be Funny and Farsi, because everything else was a bit of a miss other than my Bridge Kingdom reread, which like doesn't really count. I don't know, it just wasn't my best reading month. And you know, not every month can be amazing, I guess. Although wouldn't it be great if they could be? Alrighty, that's all I got for you guys today. A July reading wrap up that was mediocre at best, although this is probably my shortest wrap up that I've filmed, so I guess that's a win, minus the battery difficulties, but you know, I digress. Alrighty, I'm feeling a bit rambly as this video comes to a close. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to support my channel, I so appreciate it. Consider giving the video a like or subscribing. It really means so much to me as this community grows. Also, please leave any comments down below. Just say hello, introduce yourself, tell me the best book that you read in July, because you know, I'm desperate for inspiration. Yeah, so that's it. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next video soon. Bye.